Hey, it's Nicholas with the Backyard TARDIS here with another podcast spotlight, kind of spotlighting a different podcast. I listen to a ton of podcasts of all varying different qualities, designs, styles, subjects, and so I thought it would be good to kind of spotlight some of those for other ones and just kind of show why I really like these ones. The previous two I did, the Salty Nerd podcast, and I did the Scarif podcast. Well, here's another Red 5 podcast, and this is the Science Fictionary podcast. And this one hosted by David, Andrew, Marisha, and Daniel. And I really, truly enjoy. This is one of my favorite podcasts. Good, just nerd talk. I'm really into sci-fi, and so they cover a lot of that. Of course, two standout episodes to me. Episode number 36 and number 76 were episodes I was on talking about the Pillars of Fantasy and the Pillars of Adventure. Definitely go check out those really good episodes. But there's been a lot of other highlights. They've had other guests on. On episode 48, they had Jessica with Stories by Darksaber Light, and they talked some Stargate. And you know I love me some Stargate, so that was really good. And they've a lot of different ones, so like just some key episodes here that I think are definitely worth your listen. Episode 14, David's first exposure to Firefly. He binged the whole thing. They came on and talked about just how great and amazing Firefly is. They had their Pillars series. So they started with sci-fi. And this is what made me fall in love with this podcast. And this was episodes 17, 18, 20, 22, 24, and 26. So they went through pillars of sci-fi in literature, TV, movies, miscellaneous, and then listeners list. But then they followed that up with the pillars in fantasy. And on the note of the sci-fi, while I'm not on the number 26, I added in a lot of the entries for the listeners list. So go check that out. For fantasy, you had the Pillars of Fantasy episodes 28, 30, 31, 33, 35, and 36. Kind of completed that whole arc. Once again, going over literature, television, movies, miscellaneous, and then listeners list. And then their most recent one, they did Adventures, so the Pillars of Adventure in Media, and that was episodes 60, 62, 63, 64, and then 76. Now they had a little break in there because they had Tolkien month, so they're big fans of Tolkien, so they did a whole month on that. So in addition to their Pillars series, another thing that they have is their Mount Rushmore series, which are kind of like a Pillars series in bite size. So the Mount Rushmore of action stars, the Mount Rushmore of superheroes or villains, and just kind of placing who are the faces there. And it was cool. I got to contribute a little bit to that because I suggested, hey, just like they always show in movies, that final face, that it's like a black woman president or something there off in the future. I said you should think of what's something current that doesn't really have that like pillar status yet, but probably will in a decade or two. And so they started adding that to their Mount Rushmore series. So that was cool. It's one of the things I love about the Science Fictionary. More people need to interact with them because they interact with their fans. They want to have that community experience. So if you want a podcast that's going to take notice of your comments, interact with you, the Science Fictionary podcast. They're on Twitter. Tag them if you don't know them. Message me. I'll put you in touch with them. Other things that they've done. So David is, for as much as he loves sci-fi and comics and all that, he's kind of a new when it comes to some of the classic sci-fi stuff. So he never consumed any Star Trek. So many of the early episodes, they went through all the Star Trek movies, the Star Trek shows, stuff like that, getting David acquainted with TOS and TNG. So looking forward to when they get into some Deep Space Nine and Voyager on the show. They also dived into X-Files, and really seeing David do those, experience these things for the first time, give his impressions, it takes you back, because as ones who have watched it over and over and over again, we take for granted some of that. But sometimes when you hear somebody who's experiencing it for the first time, it becomes new again. And that excitement, and then you know what's coming next, and you're like, oh, hashtag no one smile. I know what's about to happen. I can't wait till you see this episode. And it's everything you can do not to spoil it. So, really fun podcast. Definitely recommend it. And like I said, they interact with their fans. So, definitely hit them up on Twitter, on YouTube. On their YouTube is usually when they do like reviews of weekly shows, but their podcast is typically on the RSS feeds. So check them out. The Science Fictionary podcast, definitely worth your listen.